Welcome to Bigger Truth Media. This is a huge podcast. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to have Debbie and Andrew. We had Andrew last week, and I've had so many. I was telling him before the show, he's got a bunch of fans in Michigan. Including my mom. My mom called me right afterwards. She said, Andrew is awesome.
He is. He is.
Yeah. So yeah, and I had several people say, I wish we had Andrew here in Michigan. So yeah, thanks for coming back on. And Debbie, you are you moved here in 2020 from Washington State. And that was and you were involved in the Republican Party for a long time in Washington State. You were a district and county chair there.
I wasn't county chair. I was LD chair.
LD chair. Okay, so you're an LD chair in Washington State. Yes. And I'm going to let you talk briefly about your experience there, because I think it's really valuable. And I mentioned it in my report on 5 states a few weeks ago. And then when you got to Arizona, you quickly got tapped to, you became known pretty quickly, and you were Sergeant at Arms at the Maricopa County Republican Committee, MCRC, is the way we'll refer to it. So, and when we say if you're in Michigan or Oregon or any other state, about a third of our audience tends to be in Arizona, and a third in Michigan, and a third in other states. So, MCRC is the Maricopa County Republican Committee. And 2/3 roughly of all voters in Arizona are in Maricopa County. There are 20 districts. They're called legislative districts, LDs, within Maricopa County, and the precinct delegates, they're called precinct committeemen, and we'll call them PCs. So when you hear us say PCs, we're talking about precinct committeemen. And so with that, Debbie, if you could please talk about your experience in Washington, and because you had the same experience in Washington that you've had here in Arizona. So if you could
That's correct. So Washington is a caucus state, meaning that the precinct committee officer in each precinct during a presidential election year holds caucuses in their precinct to get delegates from your community to go to the county convention, where they then elect delegates for the state convention. And at the state convention, you elect your national delegates to go to the national RNC convention. In 2012, we were just flooded with amazing number of new people who we'd never seen before coming into our precinct caucuses. And when they were elected and showed up for our county convention, as they were coming in to be credentialed, I was working the credential table with somebody who'd been a longtime county chair, and we noticed they had fake ID. And that was shocking, really, because I worked in law enforcement agencies for 30 years, and it's not easy to get a fake ID. So I thought, wow, why would they be doing that? And so we had the sheriff come and remove some of these individuals. And as the day wore on during our convention to elect our delegates to the state convention, we had so much disruption in the room itself amongst the body. We had to call the sheriff again to have them removed. That was the beginning. And shortly thereafter, one of those individuals was elected chair of our county party from the county that I came from. And he immediately changed the name from Republican to Republican/Libertarian. And that's when the resolution started with the censures of our very good Republican incumbents. Now, if anybody knows anything about the state of Washington, the Republicans are the minority, and they are about to become even more of a minority because the Democrats are 1 seat away in the House and Senate from a supermajority. So you don't want to attack your Republican incumbents, and yet here were these resolutions coming down with censures of these individual representatives and senators based not on election integrity issues, but based on Second Amendment rights issues. And of course, the people bringing these resolutions with the censures called themselves constitutional Republicans, They referred to themselves as We the People, and it went downhill from there. In about 2017, I was elected chair of my legislative district, which was encompassed two different counties, parts of two different counties. And we would hold our meetings in public places so that, in meeting rooms where we could have our PCs come and listen to what the board was doing. Typically in Washington State, the LDs do confidential board meetings where they approve of how much money we're going to give to the candidates, that type of thing. But I opened it up. I thought the PCs were the boots on the ground, needed to be there to hear how we were operating, needed to be close, in contact with our representatives and our senators so that they knew who they were working with and for and become more engaged. Well, as we would show up at our meetings, we noticed that there's militia type people armed to the hilt at the door, watching every one of us walk in. And it just became very offensive right from the very beginning. So ultimately, those of us who were considered to be the rhinos were removed from office as PCs, and these other individuals who I called the disruptors were brought in and took our place. They were all 3%ers and oath keepers. They were going to campaign boot camps in faraway locations in Eastern Washington. It was pretty interesting stuff.
And it's what's concerning about them being armed is not, because they weren't there to like keep the peace. They weren't armed in order to protect from an outside threat. They actually came as a threat themselves.
Yes.
And they were hostile in their attitude. And
yes.
Yeah. And so, so some other really key things that you just brought up. One is the language. They talked about being the constitutional Republicans and we the people. Did they also call the people that they were censuring? Were they censuring because they called them rhinos? And
yes, and worse, and worse.
Right. And so when they started, wasn't the House and the Senate kind of split?
It was very well. The House, the Senate itself, there were 25 Democrat senators and 24 Republican. We were one seat away from taking the Senate back. The House was 50 Democrats and 48 Republicans. And now, I mean, they're faced with a supermajority in the next election, and they'll probably get that supermajority. There just are not enough people who are willing to step forward. You don't register as a Republican or Democrat in Washington State. It's open primaries, it's open elections, and because of the Supreme Court decision that came down in the mid-2000s, it's the top two vote getters who in the primary who go on to the general. And so there's oftentimes you won't have a Republican in that general election. The only way a Republican can get elected in Washington, the very best chance is by a write-in campaign. So basically what a lot of Republican candidates started doing in the general became that third party or third candidate and do a write-in to try to split the vote between the two Democrats to get the least of the two evils elected to the state position.
Right.
It's devastating.
Right.
It's devastating.
And that's so that's just a huge warning for Arizona, because in 2020 you had a very strong majority in the House and the Senate.
Yes.
Now it's a slim majority. And they're doing the same thing as in Washington State. People just stopped wanting to get involved in the Republican Party because the meetings were it was abusive. It was beyond an unpleasant experience.
Extremely abusive.
It was actually a traumatic experience for a lot of people.
Yes.
And so we are seeing those things play out in real time right now in Arizona. We've seen it in Michigan. Tonight I have a show in Oregon, and we're going to talk about how this has happened in Oregon and the state of the things in Oregon. And it's very, very similar patterns, the same types of people. That with the even with the militia ties, with the 3%ers and the oath keepers.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of parallels with what's going on here in Arizona. So you got to Arizona and you were Sergeant at Arms with MCRC.
Yes.
And what did you see there? What?
So the first of all, I need to back up a bit. I got into Arizona on 2 days before the general election in 2020, and by the I'd say mid-December, I was already a volunteer for the AZGOP. I'd volunteered. I'd gotten hold of the volunteer coordinator. He put me to work right away. And the first thing I started doing was they wanted to know if I would help do phone calls to get the MCRC slate elected. And it was a slate of Mickey Nyland, Nancy Ordowski as first vice chair, Dan Grimm as secretary, David Ludwig as treasurer. I don't remember who the second vice chair was at that point. I was brand new. I didn't know these people. And I immediately started looking them up, and they were absolute total conservatives. Amazing individuals who'd been involved in the Tea Party movement, as well as conservative Republicans for years and years. Because I'm not going to campaign for just anybody, right? I'm not going to call complete strangers and tell them to vote for these people at this county meeting or state meeting. It was a county meeting. So I looked them up, and I knew everything I could about them, and I would answer questions about these individuals. And I even introduced myself to Mickey Nyland. They got elected, and within 2 short months, I was her appointee as Sergeant of Arms, and I was thrilled to do it. And I was really impressed when I went to the first EGC meeting. I thought it was wonderful to see these people come together, this large group of people, because the EGC isn't just the 10 board members, it's also the LD chairs, and there are 20 LD chairs in this county. And to watch these people come together, they're all diverse, they're from different backgrounds, they have different viewpoints on things, but to work together was pretty amazing. And I found Mickey to be a delightful individual. She was just a real go-getter. She gave everybody a path to speak. She gave them an opportunity to present their issues. I loved every minute of it. And then the gentleman who was the second vice chair had to resign due to his employment. And there was going to be an election of a new second vice chair. And in walked this contingency from Legislative District 15 with their candidate to be the second vice chair, and that was Brian Ferentz. And I couldn't help but notice, Arizona is a very relaxed, very Western type of state. So people wear jeans and cowboy boots and plaid shirts, In walks Brian Ferentz wearing a suit with a red shirt and an American flag tie. And it was like deja vu for me. I couldn't believe it, because that's exactly what happened in 2012 when these people showed up with their fake ID and disrupted our county convention. And it went downhill from there.
So Brian Ferentz, he's a protege of Jim O'Connor, correct?
Yes.
And how do we know that he is connected with Jim O'Connor?
Well, I've had conversations. It's not my own conversation with Jim O'Connor, but I've been told by people who have had private conversations with Jim O'Connor that Jim believed Brian Ferentz was the future of the Republican Party. He was mentoring Brian, and he thought that he was going to be the future of our party.
And I've heard that from other sources that as well, that that there were meetings going back to around that time, 2020, early 21, between Jim O'Connor and Brian Ferentz and others.
Yes.
Brian Ferentz was introduced by Jim O'Connor as being the future of the party.
Correct. I know of 2 individuals who had set up private meetings with Jim O'Connor for purposes that I shouldn't go into, but when they arrived at these meetings, there would be Brian Ferentz, Liz Harris, sometimes other individuals who had been disruptors in Legislative District 3, what would become Legislative District 3.
Sure.
So yes, I've been told this.
Mm-hmm. And I understand Jim O'Connor's been in Arizona since at least 10, 15 years, right?
I believe that is correct, is from what I could tell from what people have told me.
Right. And even back in the, around 2010, 2011, that he was engaged in a lot of the same tactics where he comes across, he talks about Jesus, he talks about the Bible, and he does these teary-eyed prayers, and then he just starts attacking people.
Yes. Oh yeah. He always starts with his.
Yeah. Trump 24 says same timelines and story as Michigan. And that's the case, especially after 2020.
Yes.
That's when we really saw things ramp up. And And so in 2021 was when that really started.
Correct.
Bloody Laser says a state legislator in Arizona calls the disruptors lizards in reference to Liz Harris. Will not disclose the laws make, but I think that is just brilliant. I love that.
It is. I love it. I know.
So while Liz Harris is on topic, Liz Harris is running for RNC committee woman. And what is the connection with Liz Harris and these?
Well, Liz Harris, I know she was originally part of the Patriot Party, from what I've been told. I should say what I've been told, she was originally part of the Patriot Party in Arizona under Daniel McCarthy. I did personally come across her signature on their petition to have the Patriot Party recognized as a legitimate political party in the state. So I do know she signed that petition.
And I think we'll probably do another show in the future about the Patriot Party.
That would be great.
Because that's a big story. And just to sum it up in 15 seconds, the Patriot Party was started by Daniel McCarthy, really in order to try to destroy the Republican Party and replace the Republican Party.
That is correct.
And there were many different prominent people within primarily the disruptor organization that had signed on to that, and it costs AZGOP a lot of money. I was told well over $100,000 to fight legally to fight the Patriot Party, and to defend its own existence, really. So that is that's another story, but that's also that's a tying in point. That's a way that we can recognize these people too. So, all right, so you saw as Sergeant at Arms there, you saw that things were starting to go down. Did Brian Ferentz get elected to second vice chair at that point?
He did not.
Okay.
He did not get elected. I believe it was on the fifth round of balloting that Michael Joyner actually was elected second vice chair. And I turned, this was hilarious because I think there were like 5 or 6 candidates, maybe more. But we did several rounds of balloting, and when he lost, you should have seen the expression on his face. Now, mind you, I later came to know from my research that he'd only been appointed a PC in June of 2021, and here he is in the end of July, first part of August, running for second vice chair on the MCRC. That's just stunning. You come out of nowhere and you all of a sudden want to be on the Executive Governance Committee.
Right.
That was weird. So, but the look on his face, the expression, the dejection, and wow, it was stunning.
Yeah. So, and we'll get a lot more. Brian may come up again. But he, in the research that I've done so far, I would say that he is the most vile, hateful, cruel, and offensive person that I've come across in any state.
Without a doubt. And the interesting thing to note, somebody brought up to me in preparation for today, they said, they were talking with me and they said, did you ever notice that there are certain people that he doesn't attack, but he's so good at attacking the rest of us and he's relentless with it. And he's relentless. But there is definitely a list of people. And when I stop to think about it, it's absolutely true. I've never heard him go after Liz Harris. I've never heard him go after Shelby Bush. I've never heard him go after some of the other disruptors, so I could name by name, but we'll leave it at that. But boy, he despises me. So, yeah. And that's okay. He's got that First Amendment right to do so.
Sure. But you, Debbie, and Andrew, I'm sure you've had that experience too. I know you have. We talked about that last week. And they focus, and they here is the disruptors that employ the same methods, that use the same language, they use the Bible in the same way. And even this Brian Ferentz, even against me, as soon as he came to my Twitter, I blocked him after his first post because I knew it was coming. I just don't have time for that crap. But in that first post, he quotes the book of Isaiah, and claiming that that good is that those who claim that good are that claim that good is evil, or the reverse or whatever. I don't remember the verse, but he was basically, he's using the book of Isaiah to say that I was evil and that he was good. And I'm like, all right, bye. I'm not even gonna engage in that with you. And so yeah, so that's Brian Ferentz. He did not win then, but he did win. So to move forward, this was in really so this was in 2021. He
2021.
he became the second vice chair. When was that? Because he did become the second.
He's not a second vice chair. He's a member. He was a member at large. He got elected at the county mandatory meeting that was scheduled in January. It would have been the second Saturday of January of 2022. There was an entire slate of these individuals: Lawrence Hudson, Liz Harris, Joni Colson, Brian Ferentz, and there was another gentleman by the name of Kevin, and I can't remember Kevin's last name. And they were on a slate that they ran, and all but Lawrence Hudson were elected to the position of member at large. I believe Joe Neglia actually won that re-election as a member at large during that election as well. So that's why the Lawrence Hudson hadn't been elected to the board at that point.
That was just a year ago. Is that right?
No, that would have been 22. That was 2 years ago.
Okay, so that was just 6 months after 6 to 8 months after that he tried, right? And so that was that the slate that Kari Lake endorsed?
I don't remember if Kari Lake endorsed. She might have. I don't even remember if she was running openly for the governor race at that point.
I don't think she did.
That would have been before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think she did.
Okay. Yeah, because that would have been early, like at the very beginning of her race, and so there really wouldn't have been much reason for her to.
No, I don't.
She didn't have much of a name yet at that point.
No.
So, so then moving forward, so we're 22. Then in August of 22, we have the primaries.
Yes.
And then the general election in November of 22, and then it was January or February when the statutory election for the EGC.
January, I believe it was January the 14th of 2023.
Okay, and that is the one where Craig Berland and Shelby Bush and Lawrence is treasurer, and that was the ticket that was the golden ticket, right? That was endorsed by Kari Lake.
Correct.
And I actually asked Shelby directly when I spoke to her why Kari Lake endorsed that ticket, which is kind of an awkward question because she was on that ticket. Shelby was on that ticket, right? And she said, it was kind of a long-winded answer, but she said, that they're just good friends. And she actually said, I told Kari not to vote for our ticket because, that she should just make her own decision and not really vote for our ticket. I said, I love you too much, Kari, to tell you what to do. She knows I have the recording of that conversation. I told her at the beginning of the conversation that I was recording it. So, and that's
Shelby's good at recording conversations too.
I'm sure she's recording it also. So that is pretty close to word for word what she said. And she said more than that too. But I've also heard that that Kari Lake had been asked directly, why she didn't support the other slate, and that her answer was, well. Shelby told me that they were anti-Trump and that they don't care about election integrity. And so either that shows that a lack of discernment. It looks like you want to respond, Debbie. So to that.
I know all these people personally. I've come to know them over the last 3.5 years, and those people that ran, Jan Boskus is a fabulous conservative Republican. I don't know anybody in the Republican Party anywhere in this country who isn't for election integrity. I just can't even imagine not being for election integrity.
Right.
So it's just stunning to me that they would make such a comment.
Right.
It's kind of strange to see them take the Democrat tactic in the sense of, like, I always hear Bongino say this, is that, a lot of the times Republicans will look at Democrats as maybe good people with bad ideas. They don't look at us as good people with bad ideas. They just look at us as bad people. And so instead of trying to tell us in detail why their process or goals that they have and methods to get there are better, they just slander us and just say we're rhinos or we're not Republicans or we don't care about election integrity when they know nothing could be further from the truth.
Oh, absolutely. I
You
agree.
know, and our gripe isn't even, you know, a lot of the things they say, we want the same thing. Again, it's just they don't have the professionalism or even a plan at all on how to get there. And that's what's frustrating to people like me, you know.
So what has happened since, you know, in the last 14 months since that slate was elected? And there were only two people that were not endorsed by Kerry that were elected. Is that right? Tatiana Pena, who's going to be on my show next Wednesday. And that's going to be just a blockbuster of a show.
I can't wait.
Yeah, she has an absolutely amazing story, and so that's going to be really great. So she's the second vice chair still, and then the other was Dan Grimm, the secretary, who he's been the secretary for some time then, right?
That's correct.
So so other than that, everyone else that's on the MCRC board and the at-large members, they were all, for the most part, they were endorsed by Kerry Lake, right?
Yeah,
well,
that's correct.
Yes.
And has she ever renounced that endorsement? Has she ever expressed any level of remorse over that or anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
I would say no, but however, there was no larger move she could have made to either correct that or send the message than to deny Jim O'Connor the endorsement and hand it to Gina.
Well, that's true.
I mean, a big part of me feels like since Trump had already made that endorsement, he may have tied her hands on that and forced her, maybe not forced her, but it's not like she was going to go against Trump and MAGA. But I mean, who knows? Who knows? That was huge, and she lost a lot of support from that side when she did that. I still see people arguing about that to this day. So
Yeah,
that was a big deal.
right. And we'll get, so while we're on that subject, the so the reason why, so that whole thing came about, I mean, she really did not have any option after Trump endorsed Gina. She didn't have the option to not follow Trump's endorsement. I mean, that would have been political suicide for her, right?
Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we know that Jim was, you know, obviously he was running, and from what I understand, the original plan was for him and Gina was going to run for RNC committee woman, right?
Yes.
And so that they were kind of on the same ticket there to some extent. For that it wasn't really official. You know, I don't know. Could you speak to that? Do I have the right understanding there, or am I off on
Well,
that?
I can't speak to that. I'm not quite sure. I knew that Gina was running for national committee woman because she had made that clear at one of the XCOM meetings. I think it was the December 16th of 2023 meeting that she announced that she was running for national committee woman. But I wasn't aware that Jim O'Connor actually was hoping to run for AZ GOP chair.
Hmm. I've been told by more than one person something to the extent of, Kerry Lake made my life miserable. And it's not necessarily directly, you know, like Kerry Lake took a lot of actions, you know, intentionally to make their lives miserable, but that the endorsements of these people on MCRC have been really tragic, not just to the county, but really to the state, and particularly to hardworking Republicans who are really good at, like you guys, who you know, have the connections, have the experience, the knowledge, and the ability to get out there and sweat and, you know, knock on doors and do the things that need to happen to get people elected.
Right.
And
I think Debbie might agree with me on this, but look, more than how it's hurt us personally, we're much more angry about how it's hurt our chances going into this next election. I mean, you had Craig Berland who ran at this January meeting running for chair, and I remember one of his advertisements. He said that the difference, because he had misquoted the balance in the MCRC bank, and it was between, I think, 3,000 or 30,000 or something to that extent. And his response was the difference between 3,000 and 30,000 is minute, basically, and ridiculous. We should be dealing in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. He's the guy that knows how to bring it in and to expect the world because they're ready to deliver. Here we are, months away from ballots going out and this general election commencing. We have tens of thousands of dollars in the bank. A lot of that money is going to be committed to lawsuits that he's going to get sucked into. Again, Debbie and I, we don't. It does make our lives harder personally, but we're just so angry that we're been put in this position going into this next election. Jan had a plan.
Yes.
Jan, her whole slate was ready to hit the ground running. They were ready to fundraise. They knew what they were doing. They actually came from places where they had won elections, right? You don't have that.
Yes.
I mean, you take Craig's own district, and we went over this, but it's a district that has more red precincts than blue from the last time, at least, that I looked at the maps, and they have zero Republican representation there. I mean, at no level do you have any Republicans in, and so I mean, that's what we're upset about. I mean, we need money to win elections. We need messaging to win elections. We didn't have time for this. If there was ever a time we didn't have time for this, it's right now.
It's right now.
And what we're seeing is, and what's so frustrating is the MCRC, they're not delivering. They're not fundraising. They're not getting out the vote. And every single time they're called out on it, it's because they're too busy working on election integrity. That's what we get every single time. And election integrity doesn't mean anything if we're just going to lose every election in a few months. It's not going to mean anything. We're all going to have to move. I don't think people realize.
Yeah, and more, and then what they're doing is a constant disruption in all of the good LDs, and even those LDs that are marginal, where we know we don't have a Republican majority, where we need to get a strong foothold, need to get people engaged. I've done some research on a few precincts and looked around, and we lost some Republicans after the 2020 election. They went into the independent role. We need to be working on getting those people back. We cannot win elections without those individuals coming back and voting Republican. It's just that simple. Right. And yet when we're spending all of our resources defending ourselves in litigation, or defending ourselves from just being thrown out of office at our local level like that, like an LD chair, this is devastating to the party. It's dividing us irreparably.
Yep.
I just would ask your listeners this question. When you have the MCRC putting out press releases that explicitly asked for 2/3 of the Republican legislature to resign over a single issue with a single legislator, are those people that are serious about winning elections? Do you think when the public gets a hold of this information, or our opponents, because they're so sloppy with how they disseminate it, do you think that's not being used against us? I mean, they don't even have to create campaign slogans. Just show the letter of leadership asking 2/3 of the legislature to resign. You don't need a campaign slogan. Those are not serious individuals about winning elections, period.
And I really hope that there are people who are listening to this who have been, you've been suckered. If you believe that Brian Ferentz, Shelby Bush, Craig Berland, Liz Harris, that they want to win elections, or really even that they want to do anything about election integrity, they are lying to you. There is only one way to do anything about election integrity, to fix our problems in terms of the problems that we have in our laws that enable election integrity, election fraud to occur. There's only one way, and that is elect Republicans who want to do something about it. Only the state legislature can fix the problem. That's it. Period. And we need
a little bit past that too. I don't even mean to jump in.
Sign those laws.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of that too, guys, that side doesn't seem to care about is, look, if you can get the most MAGA or red candidates in places where you can get them in, great. Okay. But you're not going to get anything passed unless we hold majorities. And doing that requires winning elections in places where we may have to make compromises, not in our morality in the way we'll legislate, but in the way that we campaign. That's just that simple. So going scorched earth on candidates and people in swing districts just because they're not publicly, even though privately they believe it and push it, publicly aren't saying the most far right MAGA things possible. We have to stop trying to burn those candidates down unless you have a candidate that can win with that kind of messaging and you can prove it. Until then,
Right.
we need the majorities. And
Right.
so that's, it's all encompassing. It's not just getting in these people who agree with you 100% of the time. You're not going to get that in every district.
So my legislative district in Washington that I was chair of was in the south part of a county called Kitsap. I don't even try, it's Indian, Kitsap. But that is a strong military naval base. And almost everybody there, including a bunch of my children, work for the U.S. government. They work for the Department of the Navy at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, Bangor, Trident Submarine Base, at the Keyport Underwater Warfare Center. And then the other part of my legislative district was in the very west part of Pierce County, which is the Tacoma area. It's actually called Gig Harbor. And a lot of those people either worked at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, or they worked for Fort Lewis in McChord Air Force Base, which is one of the largest military installations in the country. So I come from a background that is very, very militaristic. And those people tend to vote for candidates at a congressional level for the Democrats because they guarantee their income, their livelihood, but they vote conservative on every other race downstream and all the initiatives and referendums. So in order for our state reps and senators to get elected, they've got to be able to reach out to every single constituent in those blue counties, in those blue legislative districts. And that's how I ended up with a Republican senator and 2 Republican representatives for years, because they knew how to reach across the aisle, how to listen to their constituents, figure out what their constituents wanted, and went into the legislature and fought until 3:30 in the morning during most sessions, literally, to help get what those constituents needed for their districts. That's what it's about. This infighting with the Republican Party that we see both in Washington here, Michigan, Idaho, Oregon, South Carolina. This is destroying the Republican Party nationwide. This is not to try to get MAGA people elected. This is to destroy the party.
Yep. Yeah. So Brian Ferentz, I mean, he makes a point of saying that he's a Christian nationalist on his blog. Like that's in his introduction of himself, the description of himself, he says he's a Christian nationalist. Now, he is not a Christian. A Christian is someone who has their hope and their trust in Christ, and in gratitude for what Christ has done for them, they are doing everything they can to obey him. There is no obedience there in Brian Ferentz. He's written he sells books that he's written, horror books where children are compromised.
Yes.
and taken advantage of. Like, this is not a Christian, okay? But he's making a point of saying that he's a Christian nationalist because they want to, they're trying to put a stench for independents in particular on the Republican Party. They're trying to drive the party, that they're trying to make the party think that, okay, the leadership of the Republican Party is this Christian nationalist cult. And they're acting as a cult. They're not this, it doesn't represent Christ. It doesn't represent Christianity. And it doesn't represent the Republican Party either. But they're trying to project to the rest of the world, to independents in particular, that this is what the Republican Party stands for, to make it as small a tent as possible. And really to do everything they can to harm chances in the general election. Now, Kari Lake did this in her gubernatorial race, to an extent, with the way that she bashed John McCain. There were 350,000 Republican voters, normal, reliable Republican voters, who stayed home on election day, did not vote.
That's correct.
In 22. And that was after, and really it started from everything that I've gathered, her bashing of McCain really started in full force after the primary, which is ridiculous.
That is true, but even before the primary, I was present at an event in Scottsdale. There probably were 350 people present to hear it, and her behavior on the stage with the other 3 gubernatorial candidates was absolutely abhorrent. I couldn't believe it. She was out of control, and I knew then I could never. I don't know how anybody could. Well, I can't say that because if she gets through the the primary, I've got to vote for her on the general. But it was stunning. The behavior was stunning.
Right.
You just can't do that in the Republican Party.
No. Well,
Democrats don't do that even.
I mean, you can't do that and win a general election.
No.
Yeah. and you just can't.
So yes, it was after, I believe it was in August that she did, after the primary, that she attacked all the McCainites here in the state.
Right. Which is, and in August, so Carrie Lake's campaign manager up until August was, it was Lisa something. It was her best friend of like 29 years, I was told.
Right.
And at that time, she, in August, right around, I don't know if it was right before or right after she won the primary, she basically kicked her best friend to the curb and took on Caroline Wren. And it was really after that things became kind of strange. And Caroline, I was also told that Caroline Wren made at least $2 million between August and November, just as her cut of the fundraising that happened. And so, and I haven't verified that, but I've been told that by a couple of sources that's likely what she took in person. So, and she's still there, and Caroline Wren's showing up on Steve Bannon's War Room very frequently. And, but there's just Carrie Lake would have won. She would be the governor right now had she just not bashed McCain and his voters and told them not to just go to hell, which is basically what, those were pretty close to her exact words. And, she said that, I don't want your votes. Had she just not done that, she just stayed silent on McCain, she would have won. She'd be the governor right now. She only lost by 10,000. There's 350,000 that stayed home. That how many of those were McCain voters that were just offended and didn't want to have anything to do with her because she'd gone around slamming.
I was an observer.
Scott, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Adam.
I was going to say we saw the inverse with Martha McSally, right? I mean, we saw the straight inverse with Martha McSally. There were plenty of people. I'm not saying it's okay. Nobody should be doing this, but it's just worth pointing out. You saw the same thing with McSally in the sense that there were plenty of MAGA people whose doors I knocked on who were not going to vote for McSally, but were happy to vote for Trump. And we lost 2 Senate seats as a result of that.
Absolutely.
Let's just use the term rhino just to classify them, but whether they're independents, P&Ds, I don't care who they are, the Republican Party needs to understand that you may not want these people in leadership, but without their votes, you are dead in the water.
That's right.
And if I could take anything from what we've been talking about, and what everyone should be asking themselves is, where are the attacks on the Democrats? Where are they? Because Brian Ferentz, I remember meeting Brian Ferentz right in the beginning. I called him and I said, Brian, it's refreshing to see somebody who's near my age here, who I could collaborate with. It seems like you know a lot about the internet and technology, as do I. I look forward to working with you. And then you have this go on, I just don't understand where the offense is towards Democrats. And I think everyone should be asking themselves this question, because the reality is we are headed to a general election. And then in January, you're going to have the option again to decide who's going to lead this county party. And so I think one thing to remember is one of the whole points of these conversations that we're having and identifying these key players and actually what's going on within the county is, we have the chance to fix this in less than a year. If you're tired of false promises, if you're tired of being called a rhino because you want a budget or because you'd like a plan or some kind of coherent roadmap, then you have the option to fix this in January. So keep that in mind. That's why we're talking about this. We don't take any pleasure in taking time out of our day to talk about the things these people are doing in leadership. We don't, it's not personal. When it gets personal is that we're going to lose our state because these people are not doing their job. That's the only thing about this that's personal.
Listen, I moved here. Somebody asked me recently, about a month ago, why I left Washington State. I was born and raised there, lived my entire life there. My husband and I had 10 children in that state, and we have 19 grandchildren that they all came from there. Of course, they dispersed because it's unlivable. You talk about being ungodly. That is the worst place to live. We moved to Arizona because we are refugees from that type of lifestyle, from that type of politics and governance. We can't do that anymore. And I don't want to see that happen here. My lifeblood is here now to save this state from that type of disruption that I've seen firsthand. And I pray, I'm on my knees. While they're calling themselves a Christian nationalist, blasting all the rest of us, I'm on my knees. And I'm praying that God have mercy on us and that we don't lose this next election.
Absolutely.
I think Scott brings up something pretty important too, in that a lot of times we get the feeling like, who knows who wants to really win this election, and sometimes we question where some of these allegiances are in terms of our county party. I think might be a good time. In February, I introduced a resolution to the MCRC. I'd like to read it quickly. It says, whereas we acknowledge the leadership of President Donald Trump and recognize that he is the presumptive nominee and rightful leader of the Republican Party, be it resolved that starting from February 7th, 2024, the MCRC EGC hereby commits to actively supporting and collaborating with candidates and elected officials endorsed by President Trump at a minimum until the culmination of the 2024 general election. Further resolve that this resolution underscores our dedication to fostering cooperation and solidarity within our organization and our true commitment to MAGA. That resolution was voted down unanimously, other than my one vote. And I can explain that a few of the chairmen in there are supporting a different Senate candidate, and under the terms this resolution is written, that would require them to switch their support, which is why a lot of those people didn't support this resolution. But for the other half of the EGC, the Shelbys, the Craigs, everybody else, they're supporting Kerry Lake, which means their candidates are covered in this resolution. So why wouldn't we do everything we could to cooperate and support MAGA candidates to foster a cooperation within the MAGA movement? I just can't understand that.
I know.
I think everyone should be asking themselves, why are these people? It was the same thing with the county meeting. We're at the county meeting, or the state meeting rather, I apologize. We're at the state meeting, and you have Shelby and Craig and Brian. Their entire side is wearing shirts that say Donald Trump on them. Yet they're in there on the mic and in the crowds rallying for people to vote against the Trump endorsed candidate. There's something wrong here, guys. This is not genuine. This is not genuine. You know, if Trump was in the room and saw people with his shirt on endorsing people that he's not endorsing, what do you think he would say or do?
Mm-hmm.
And he certainly wouldn't continue to support this kind of activity or these individuals. That's so disingenuous.
Yep.
So to your point, Scott, I sometimes wonder, and more time that goes on and the more stuff that goes on, who does want to win these elections? Who is serious about solving election integrity? Because it's certainly not the people that have evidence and won't turn it over or won't message properly or refuse to fundraise. Those people aren't going to win elections.
Right. Yeah, Jason Mickelborg says right. He also says that the infighting seems to be by design in most aspects. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Trump 24 says, Debbie and Andrew, we sadly understand this all too well. You are not alone. Thank you for all you're doing. That's a comment from Michigan. Lauren Turner says, whoa, congratulations, Debbie, on 10 children.
You should see Christmas.
Yeah, I'm sure that's awesome. And she says the mamas are on our knees with you. So
thank you, Lauren. Thank you. All mamas should be on their knees, believe me.
Right. Yeah.
My heart goes out to anybody raising small children at this point in time in our country. We have so much at stake with this next election. Yeah. So much is at stake.
Right. Bloody Laser says the disruptors defend a PC in my LD14 who makes spectacles at every meeting, and those spectacles. So we haven't really gotten too deep into this, but just in line with your experience in Washington, where they were censoring candidates. I mean, that's exactly what MCRC has done. That in fact, that's their most common action, really, from what I understand, at their EGC meetings, is censoring. I mean, you guys have both of you been censored?
Scott, more importantly, of that they're censoring, I think, is why they're censoring.
Oh yeah.
So yes, I have been censored, and let me explain to you why. I mean, I was censured basically for going to the Board of Supervisors because I had been made aware that the Board of Supervisors intended to change the process of precinct committeeman applications. So at the earliest opportunity, I presented 3 distinct concerns to the Board of Supervisors. Number one, I urged them not to alter any existing structure and to preserve the decentralized nature of our party for PC appointments. I requested that they maintain the appointment process as is, and I never once called for a halt in any PC appointments. And I expressed specific concerns with PC applications in my district and other districts that I thought were being unfairly held up, or we didn't know why they were being held up.
Right.
So,
Right.
so I went there, I presented these 3 concerns. I told them not to hold anything up and not to change the process. And the very next meeting, you had the entire MCRC at that meeting. And they were saying the same thing I was. Don't change the process, don't do anything. The problem was they were a month late. The meeting that I was at was the meeting to state your case on this specific issue. And by the time they had got there, the Board of Supervisors had already decided that they were indeed going to change the process. They were not going to, basically, they were going to centralize the power to the district chairman. And so, again, important to note that they're censoring people, but even more important to note why. Anyone that stands in the way of their centralization of power in the Maricopa County Party will be censured. You will be attacked because what they want is for Craig Berlin to have all the power and say over anything precinct committeeman related, which may seem great while he's the chairman, but let me tell you, they won't always be in power. And when they get enemies in power, they're going to get stomped by these policies and precedent that they've set. It's horrible. No one should be operating like this.
That's right.
That's not the way the Republican Party was designed to, it's designed to be a bottom-up organization, not a top-down tyrannical dictatorship.
Right.
That's what they are clearly. I mean, last week the MCRC passed I wrote a story about it. They passed a tribunal resolution, creating.
Right.
It's nuts. It is shocking, but not surprising because it's consistent with all of their behavior. And when I texted Shelby Bush and asked her about that, she says, "Well, I didn't vote for it." But she didn't have to. It was such a majority; it didn't matter. And did she speak out against it? Did she say, "No, this is wrong"?
No,
I don't think so. Yeah,
no.
So,
no. Just like they weren't against ballot chasing, right? And now that Trump says it, they're all about it, even though they've passed a resolution at the county meeting saying they weren't going to focus on it. That's what we mean when we talk about bylaws or precedent. None of this seems to matter to them. They selectively take which motions from the body pass to implement, and some they just ignore and act like never happened. It's just,
the notion that candidates don't want to win is extremely, extremely real. Here in Michigan, I in my first 2 major reports that I wrote back in January and early February were about Christina Caramo, who thankfully has been removed as state chair here in Michigan, but she ran for Secretary of State, and she had no intention. Her handler, really, the shadow operator, Mike Labadie, who I believe continues to control her psychologically, was he wanted her to lose. And I showed the evidence how it was very clear that he's deliberately sabotaged her campaign, sabotaged everything from fundraising to preventing door knocking from occurring, all kinds of things that clearly were intended in the messaging. When Trump came out at his last trip to Michigan before the 22 election, he sat in the green room with the 3 candidates for governor, secretary of state, and attorney general. He told them, these are the bullet points that we want you to cover. And she was the only of those 3 candidates that didn't say what Trump wanted her to say. Instead, she said what Mike Labadie told her to say, which is talking about abortion. This Secretary of State candidate talking about abortion and Christianity and stuff, and for a general election. Like it's just it's very clear. She lost by 600,000 votes. She never conceded, and claimed election fraud. And so it's a very real thing, and I'm not taking lightly my own belief. This is my opinion, and I could be wrong. I humbly admit that I could be wrong because I don't know Kari Lake's mind, and I don't know the mind of those around her who are advising her. But I do not believe that she wanted to win the 22 election for governor. And I don't believe that if she gets the nomination that she will want to win for Senate. I just, I think that, there's something, unless she comes out and she renounces those endorsements, she renounces the behavior of these people that are they're deliberately trying to take down the Republican Party. Unless she actually renounces them and says, this is wrong and we need to change course here. And really, steps forward and starts acting in a different way and really, and even apologizes to the McCain voters and said, I'm telling you that I didn't want your vote. That was wrong. Let's not, we need to come together. If she took action like that, that would change my opinion, but I don't see that kind of action coming from her. And so, and this is part of the reason why I'm really blessed to have Sheriff Lamb coming on the show in 2 weeks, and I can't wait to have him on. And so, yeah, and I think he is the only candidate in this race in Arizona that actually wants to become the senator.
He does. He was here
and win the general election.
Yeah, I had a meet and greet for him 2 weeks ago. It was amazing. I was amazed at the crowd that showed up and the people that wanted to get involved in his election. I was shocked at the amount of donations. I mean, geez, I've done these meet and greets for decades all over the place, and it's hard to get people to donate, especially in a primary. They want to wait till the general, but people wanted to know where to put the money. They are, and what I specifically did was look for people who I knew were not actually registered Republicans to come sit with a group of people that I invited that were definitely Republican. And then I had voter registration forms there and told them, this isn't a general election issue. This is a primary election issue. You need to fill out this form. And I've got them here. And I said, there are 2 other deputy registrars in the audience along with me. We can help you with this. And we need you to change your registration to become a Republican so you can vote for Sheriff Lamb in the primary. People walked out the door with those forms in their hands.
That's awesome.
That's what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
We need to be targeting these people who have the same ideals that we do, who were and are, for all intents and purposes, conservative Republican voters, and get them back registered as a Republican and vote in the primary. And maybe we can get Sheriff Lamb past that hurdle into the general and have a good chance of getting him elected.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But your assessment about these candidates not really wanting to be elected, I have come to that agreement or that decision as well, or determination. They really like I think they like to be in front of the camera. I think they like to be the focus of attention. What I've done in my past was when I went doorbelling, I had the candidate with me. I have not ever gone doorbelling without a candidate being with me. So when the person at the door wants to speak to that person or has a question for that candidate, I say, hold on, and I turn around and grab them from the door across the street and make them stand there and talk to that individual. There is nothing better than retail campaigning where the candidate is there to answer those questions in person, shake that individual's hand, look them in the face and ask them, what are your concerns? Why and how do you want to see things change? What can we do for you? That's how you get people to vote for you, not riding in a bus up and down major highways. And that's what happened here in the gubernatorial race. She was on a bus.
Right.
I can't see a candidate on a bus unless I'm on the bus, and I'm not getting invited on those bus rides. So I didn't see. That's how you door knock. You take that candidate with you.
Right.
It's person to person, and that's a candidate that wants to win. They're out there kissing those babies and shaking those hands. By the way, McCain did that. I may not be a McCain supporter, but McCain did that. That's how you win elections.
Right. Yeah. Let's go through a few comments and then. Oh wait, here we go. Jason says, I feel like I have no choice but to run for an office, run for anything you can. And that's, that really goes in with, with what you were just saying about, helping people to change their party affiliation so that they can vote in the Republican primary. But even a step further is there's still a week and a half, 2 weeks. I think you guys still have a couple weeks there in Arizona to be a write-in delegate, right? And
Yeah,
so
Monday, I think it's a cutoff date, Monday the 15th.
April 15th. Yeah.
Or April, yeah.
okay, so you just have a few more days.
Yes.
So if you're watching this and you're not a delegate and you're in Arizona, find out if there's an open spot where you can be a write-in candidate. Talk to I'm sure you could talk to either Debbie or Andrew. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you with that. And if there's talk to your neighbors, get out there, just talk to people. And it's the solution to this is in one-on-one conversations. It's in talking to voters, talking to delegates, just helping, just spread the truth, just asking questions, just it's through that personal engagement, the work that both of you have done in getting out there and knocking on doors.
Yeah.
And there's also, we've lost a lot of precinct committee officers and committeemen in all the states. And what we need to do is to go back through our history, look at who these people were, look at their voting records, re-engage them, make sure that they're not, of course, disruptors or somehow related to disruptors. And we need to get these people back into the fold. They're the boots on the ground. We need those individuals. We need to bring them back. That's all there is to it. So we have to start that campaign. And we may not be able to get it in one election cycle, but by 2 election cycles, because of the sheer numbers in Arizona, we should be able to get a good stronghold of our PCs back into a PC position.
Right.
Yeah. Go after new blood too, guys. Look, if you're in leadership at any capacity in your party, wherever you are, go to the candidates that are running, especially on a little bit higher level, and press them for phone number lists. Someone is sitting on a list of tens of thousands of phone numbers of voters that you could be sending text messages to or things like that. There are programs you can set up, $300 a month. You can send 30 to 60,000 text messages. There are tons of ways you can reach out. I know LD4, Dan Farley did this mass texting on a big level. He was bringing in a lot of people like that. So yeah, there's tons of ways. Go after everybody. New blood too.
Right. Jason says, I thought District 4 here in Michigan were the only ones voting against Trump endorsed candidates. I was just advocating for and voting against a Trump endorsed candidate. Trump has endorsed Kari Lake, but Trump's not going to change his endorsement. He doesn't do that. But if we can get Sheriff Lamb across the finish line, obviously he will endorse Sheriff Lamb for the general. So Joe Branda says the grassroots have been hijacked by these disruptors, using new delegates and leading them to destroy the party. Many of the well-meaning delegates have been deceived.
That is correct.
Absolutely correct.
But it's a process, guys. You take it back one part at a time. And one thing that our side hasn't been doing, which is what I think Scott's trying to do, is get the story out there. We're all doing too much to get the story out there, and the other side focuses on just getting the story out there. I hate even calling them the other side. These people, for the most part, would vote the way we will. I want to extremely stress that this is a professionalism situation, at least on my end. When I look at it, it's not personal. You guys know, in life you can get somewhere or you're not going to get somewhere, and it's all about your procedures and process that determined if that was possible. So that's where we have a disagreement.
Yep. Yeah. And it's not, I think it's really about my target is the leaders of the organization. And, because what they have done, that's where there's malice. And so, that's really where the target is. Blood Red Elephant says, amazing, Debbie. And I cannot wait for the conversation with Lamb. I agree. I'm super excited for that. Jason Mickelberg says, I went door to door the other day and people were mad as hell. Any conservative should be able to get elected this cycle. And that's exactly right. And that is why they're doing this. Anybody that says that there's no point in voting because of election fraud, which I've heard that a lot too. If that were true, they would not be trying to destroy the Republican Party. They would
I'm telling you guys, whoever is telling you not to vote because of election fraud, you are talking to a Democrat. I don't know what else to tell you.
Absolutely.
I mean, what fraud do they need to do if you're not going to show up? That's the
Yeah,
easiest fraud they ever did, was talk you out of it.
That's right. That's right.
You know, I mean, that's just crazy.
And some of those 350,000 voters in 22 in Arizona, I'm sure that's the reason for that. I know that happened here in Michigan, that there were a lot of voters that just, the Republican voters that just stayed home because they thought there was no point. So Jason,
95% of people voted by mail in the PPE in Arizona. 95%. It's time to not be embarrassed if you're going to send your ballot in by mail. Quit letting people talk down to you because you're choosing your particular way to vote. Vote. Sure. And every day you don't vote, when you have your ballot, you're costing the party money because we're chasing that ballot.
that's correct.
Instead of hating on the process, try to get leaders in to fix it and learn it. I can't tell you how many people hate on the process, but don't understand that you could go check on your ballot, check the status, all that stuff. Yes, there could be corruption. We could be hacked by the Chinese. You know, I understand all that's true, but by just bashing the process and saying it's completely inept and saying there's no way we can win, what people are doing is turning everybody off to learning how it works, what they should be doing, ways they can protect their vote or monitor their vote. They're just making a spectacle out of it. So don't be embarrassed. Vote however you want to vote.
That's right.
You know.
Well, I worked on a very close state senatorial race one time with the candidate very closely, and in the state of Washington, of course, it's all mail-in. There is no polling place to go to. It's all mail-in ballot and has been for about 25 years. But there was a way that the LD chairs would get an update every day at the close of business. We'd know who in our legislative district had voted and who did not. And because we had that information, that gave us the opportunity to target those households, those individuals, and get them to turn those ballots in. And as they dropped off daily, it reduced the amount of contact we'd have to make with these individuals. But that's how you do it. That's why voting early sometimes and by mail-in ballot is very important, because you know who we need to target. And you don't know, obviously, what the vote totals are, but you sure can tell by who is voting and who isn't voting what your race is going to look like in the end. So it benefits your candidate to have that information early. That's and right. To be able to target those strong conservative voters.
Yep. And that's,
I've seen it. And we lost that election by 102 ballots. I'm telling you, that is a heartbreaker.
Yeah.
That is a heartbreaker. And so I can't stress it enough that people need to become involved in the process, understand it, read the statutes, learn it, and then start working with those candidates. Help them chase those ballots to get those people in your precincts or legislative district, get their ballots turned in so that their vote counts and our candidates get elected. That's what this is about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where, Trump 24 says, bank your vote so no one can steal your vote. And Jason says, go to checkmyvote.org to audit your address. Make sure that you're getting the proper ballots. And all of that is just, it's really important. And especially, here in Michigan, the stealing your vote is a pretty real thing, because now it's illegal to even check for voter ID. So anybody can go in and say that they're you and provide your address and get your ballot. And so you wait for election day, especially if you go late in the day, there's a pretty good likelihood that somebody will have already voted for you.
Wow.
So yeah, we gotta get out there, gotta vote early, and help as many people to do the same, and encourage them. And if somebody's discouraged and says there's no point, there's no hope, they've been lied to, and just help them to see that. That's right. And along those lines too, because we said this is going to take years. Another false idea that's part of the psyop that's been terrible and super destructive is that the world is going to end if Trump isn't elected. We see this like in various ways, like the world is just going to end, and it's all, and I'm not suggesting that it's not important. I'm not suggesting that it wouldn't be devastating, but what we need to see is that no matter what happens in November, life is going to go on, and we'll find the way. and that way is not to engage in some sort of a physical uprising against the government, because that is part of what they want. They want a physical uprising against the government so that they can justify martial law and put us under the heel of their jackboots. And that's, that is a part of
No
this.
doubt.
So, so I just wanted to put that out there, because I have not said that publicly, but I think that's really important.
Oh, I would agree.
It is, and your state legislature and your town and city councils, those are the only people that are going to be able to defend you should Biden somehow be able to stay in office. So remember that too, because that is that's how your life goes on. It's having those people in office to defend you against some of this madness.
Right. The solutions are long term. We have to encourage more people to get involved in the party as a PC, as a precinct delegate, in order to get involved in debating the issues and helping to really create long term solutions. And so anybody that silences debate within the Republican Party, they're not a Republican, and that's kind of what this is all about. So, do you guys have any parting words before we go?
Just
Vote
another reminder that
down ballot.
Yeah, bond signs and bond arguments will be due in the coming months, guys. So if you have schools or towns or cities that are trying to either increase or continue your heightened property tax, now's the time to start thinking about signs and creating arguments to put in voter guides if you have those.
Right. Yeah, and that's just another reason. There's so many reasons to vote Republican in this election, for not just for Republicans to vote Republican, but nobody wants the property taxes to go up. So, so you guys are doing great work. I really appreciate you being on. I think that this is really, I'm just couldn't be happier with how this went. So thank you all for tuning in and for contributing, and vote down all the millages, Jason says. So we'll let Jason have the last word. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Andrew, have a great day.